By now, that intro should serve as enough of an introduction, so let's just pick off where we left off. Look what they want. They want us to perform an orbit around the Moon, and that seems just dandy. Look at all the returns. We want that. Give us that. Now it's time to start considering even bigger vehicles, I think. Which isn't going to be an impossible task to achieve. So what we're doing is simply taking our Moon flyby mission, which served us very well. It doesn't have enough delta V to get back into Moon orbit and return. However, if we strip away all the science we strapped on there and strap it onto a more potent booster, it should be fine. We get it a bit more delta V by changing out the engine. As I showed you earlier, the Spark engine is going to give us more delta V than the Terrier. We get rid of all the experiments we've already done, and we add an extra fuel tank to our bottom stage. But you may say, well, that's going to slow you down on the pad, right? Yeah, but it's worth it. Explaining everything as I go along, actually making progress. Woohoo! Well, we may as well throw in explanations all over the place. Okay, so your TWR off the pad. Many people say, well, you need at least like 1.6. No, you don't. What's that? That's a waste of engine, is what it is. You want to bring along as much fuel per engine as you can possibly muster to get the most delta V, right? And you will have higher gravity losses the more fuel you bring along, right? Because you have to push that up from the surface. But you will have a net gain of delta V, even factoring in gravity losses all the way up to a TWR of something, well, all the way down to a TWR of something like 1.2 in stock, and even further in something like the realism overhaul, where your tank masses are lower, because now we have to not only lift the extra fuel but also the extra tank mass, and the diminishing returns kick in way sooner that way. But even this is going to be more effective than initial TWR of something like 1.6. We're lofting high right now, and I'm fine with that because we have this little weak sauce drag inducing engine up top, remember? And that was giving us issues before, so we just want to get out of the atmosphere as soon as possible. Also, the TWR on our next stage is going to be quite pitiful. So doing something like that, getting way up there, and then we just stitch that and go on our merry way. But now you can see we're actually seeing sort of the acceleration we would expect, because we're out of the atmosphere and it's not doing stuff to us. So this was a non-optimal ascent by pretty much every measurement, every standard. When you're in a situation like this, there's like one of two things you should have done when you're coming up and you're just seeing your apps getting away from you while your orbital speed is still very low. One is you could have gone lower, but we know that we have issues with that on this rocket design, simply because the engine is of another form factor than the tanks it's attached to, which apparently causes issues for stock. It could be that this rocket would have been fine, and that the issues were in how we had mounted the probe body on the previous design. But let's not take any risks, right? The second thing we could have done here is to loft equally high but bring along more fuel with us. That would have meant we had a lower TWR. That meant that during the ascent our apps wouldn't have gotten away from us as quickly, and we could have gotten more stuff done with the fuel we brought along with us. However, for this in this certain instance, I believe we have enough fuel to get the mission done. So that's just something to think of in general when you're launching your rocket. Like, am I lofting too high? Well, then there's one of two things I should try to get even more out of my first stage. So yeah, if you can get your mission done, then perhaps you can do an even harder mission if your ascent profile is looking like this, using the same first stage and thereby being more economical. Anyways, as I plot for the Mun encounter, I realized that, well, we were perfectly in line for just burning 4 Mun encounters. We sort of had to wait for an orbit since I hesitated. I should have actually looked at the map and realized that, yeah, okay, we could have saved some time here. But it's your standard fair Mun encounter. We just plot for it and we burn for it. It's nothing exciting, really. What are you doing? You're going to hit the Mun. Well, yeah. Something like that, I suppose, for now. And then what we'll do here is over here we just do something like this. Fantastic. And then, yeah, just tweaking it until we get something like a 90-degree inclination. Because what we want to do is obviously get an EVA report over all the biomes. More science. Yay! Combining fun with pleasure with profit, or whatever. Heading out here. It's not going to be super precise. This is just a mid-course. We just plopped the node down, remember? Assuming we were in the right place to do such a correction. We didn't really check. And we got it at 7 kilometers. Would have been fine if we were equatorial, but the mountains over at the poles can be up to something like, I don't know, 9, I think, kilometers. We'll go for 11. That's good. That's Oberthy enough. So you can hear from the recording that I was kind of tired recording all of this, but yeah, that's no excuse. I'm gonna make my old self talk a lot. Like, let's listen to him again, just for the sake of it. He's going to do some delta V calculations. That's always fun. Let's refresh our memories on what those are. Now, how do we figure out our delta V in flight? We don't have any numbers on screen, right? Well, that's where you're wrong. Well, if we focus on our craft, it will give us our total mass, which is 1.61 tons. We also know how much fuel we're bringing, right? So, let's just make sure we're recording in, yeah, we're recording in the right mode. So we have our calculator here. How much fuel are we bringing? Well, we're bringing all the, well, okay, how much propellant are we bringing? We're bringing all the oxidizer. We're bringing all the liquid fuel, which is that. And that gives us the total number of units of propellant we have. Each unit weighs 5 kilograms, meaning we have 317.15 kilograms of propellant, which means our mass ratio is going to be, obviously in tons, this would be 0.317, or let's say 0.32. Let's be nice, let's round up, which is exactly the kind of thing that will get you killed, but that's another problem entirely. So 1.61 minus 0.37 is 1.24, so our mass ratio is 1.61 over 1.24. And then we can do the whole thing where we take the logarithm and we take the exhaust velocity, and we get, wait, what? That was our mass ratio. We took the logarithm, yes, we multiply that by our exhaust velocity. which is that times. There we are. Okay, so we have 819. Now we can start plotting and see if 819 will give us what we need, and obviously it will, but just to illustrate, because then we can take our maneuver nodes here, and if we want to get into a low lunar orbit, which would be sort of like that, that's another 157, so round up to 160. And then we can sort of figure out, okay, given an optimal return window, what can we actually do? What will it cost us to get back to Kerbin? And you can sort of see that this, the maneuver I'm plotting right here, would be an optimal return, because the plane of our orbit here, when we exit, is going to be aligned with the direction of motion of the moon. So that means we won't have any sort of steering losses, you can imagine them, if we were going either radially in or out in relation to the orbital direction of the Mun. We would be expending delta V, that just to correct that, sort of, you can imagine, on our exit burn. So that's what our exit burn would look like. So our total delta V requirements is currently 160 plus roughly 271, which I'm not even going to add, because we can clearly see where we've got margins. Yeah, fantastic. We built it with margins, and it turns out it works just fine. And from there on out, the excitement is sort of dead, I guess, because now we know everything will work out. We know our optimal re-entry window, so we can easily hit that. We know how to plot the return maneuver. So what we'll do now is sit in low lunar orbit and pick up all the science that we missed on our first flyby. Remember, we only hit about 5 biomes then, I don't remember. But there are something like 14 in total, so each EVA report will net us some science, and then compounded on it all, this mission is going to bring us back a heap of new data for our guys in the lab to play with. So all of that is very, very, very good for us. We'll of course later on do the same thing for Minmus. We'll see how many episodes that'll take. We'll focus on the Mun for now for a while, because yeah, that's where the progress contracts are going to sort of steer us for a while. I'm not sure if it's sort of biased to some extent based on difficult settings, how you play the game or whatever. But yeah, I always see the Mun and then maybe Minmus later on, if I haven't advanced far enough reputation-wise to have them telling me to go to Duna or Eve or Ike or wherever. So yeah, boring part of the episode. This is the science spam bit. It's what it is. It's how you play this game. Isn't this realistic? Isn't this what they did during the Apollo missions? Apollo 8, let's go to orbit around the Mun and spam EVA reports. I don't think they did any EVAs on Apollo 8, but had they done so, they would have spammed EVA reports, that's for sure. That's what you do around the Mun. I know this because I play Kerbal. There we go. Oh, it's the lowlands. Point is, we got it. We have it. Let's go. Let's get out of there. You know what? This isn't paying us well enough, is it? What we can do here, I assume, is head over here and see if we... observational surveys. These pay a lot, so let's get one of those as well. The only issue with that contract is that we have to be below 10 kilometers, and as you can see, it all ended up over the poles, so that may actually be an issue. Let's see here, it's below 11, below 10.5 is the lowest. So let's get that to 10.3 and let's get the other one to 10.3. We don't want to go any lower than that because there are mountains on this here rock. Our retrograde is to the north, so that's there. And time warping because I'm super impatient. Not even looking at our app apps, we just know that as our peri-apps runs away, we're getting more and more circular. And then we start the whole process all over again. Like, we still have a few biomes to pick up, but now we also have to pick up these survey markers, and it would be unbearably tedious and boring to do these unless you actually got way paid from doing them. They are probably the most imbalanced contract in stock by far, I think. Simply by how easy you can actually do them once you just get into orbit and sit there for a while. There's no real challenge to it, just be in a polar orbit and you will hit them sooner or later. Usually later. Yeah, I'd recommend not doing them around Kerbin, simply because A, the planet is bigger than the Mun, and these sort of have a fixed radius in which you can hit them. You have to be within a certain number of kilometers to hit them. That does not vary by size of the planetoid you're orbiting. So when you're orbiting something like Minmus, it's going to be a very large relative surface of the moon you can sort of be over and get the contract done. If you're orbiting something very, very, very large, say Joule, then the opposite is obviously true. Also, it's easier to do this with bodies that rotate slowly. So something like, Tylo or the Moon or the Mun, or anything that's sort of tidally locked and far out into orbit would be an excellent choice to actually consider these missions for. Whereas something like, Joule also rotates very quickly, so that's one you wouldn't want to do this on. And then you have, basically any planetoid that isn't tidally locked with its parent is usually rotating fairly quickly enough that you wouldn't perhaps consider doing these missions. Eve sort of rotates in a sane, I think it has an 18-hour period or something like that, which is 3 times that of Kerbin's. So that's almost acceptable, but then again, too big to really consider. What you could do is perhaps have an ion probe do these, and then you could use the high delta V you have available to you to sort of steer yourself to be over the right spot at the right time. But this is for uncorrected trajectories, which is sort of what you'd want for these to actually pay off. Yeah. Not the most fun part of the game, but it's going to get us paid and it's going to let us do more stuff. We'll get back to the ROI spreadsheet and see how well this actually pays for itself, and see if my calculations are correct as well. So let's actually go to the tracking station for once, I suppose. Long time since we've been here, and wait for our orbital plane to align with the orbital plane of the moon, make them perpendicular in one direction and not the other, so to say. As you can see here, it's going to be about 1 orbit away, so we can start to plot our return from here. And now we just add a maneuver here. Something like that. Check this out, and it's going to be 270 should net us a return, had we been equatorial. But now some of our velocity is wasted. So we're going to have to spend another like 5 delta V. I hope we can afford that. Okay, 28 kilometers will obviously kill us, but 39 will not. But that's spoilers. How can you know? Yeah, once you know we have a good re-entry window on one flight for a certain vessel, then every flight is going to work for that altitude for that vessel, right? And the pod in and of itself, the only thing we've done is remove the experiments, but they burned off so early in the flight that they didn't change the flight parameters much of it. And yeah, even so, we knew we had margins both ways. Anyways, yeah, that's something we don't really have to worry about in Kerbal Space Program, stock or otherwise. In that, in real life, atmospheres tend to vary with the weather. So what could be a safe re-entry window one part of the year could be completely different like another part of the year, or even another part of the day. Atmospheric pressures and densities and all that varies. Which is why most missions actually go for propulsive captures when they go to planets with atmospheres around them. Because they don't want to... Well, as long as you're trying to get into orbit. Because they don't want to actually do the calculations and assume things about the atmosphere, because it tends to vary. So what you do is to do an initial capture into an eccentric orbit using propellant, and then you could sort of aerobrake over multiple passes, being very careful, and measure your telemetry after each pass to see what difference that made over a course of months. And there are plans to sort of add the ability to brake not using only the atmosphere but also the magnetic flux that you're seeing on re-entry. So you'd add a magnet on the spacecraft, and that would generate a magnetic field, which would then induce sort of a resistance to slow you down, which would allow you to, well, more precisely control your braking. Because if you feel like, okay, maybe we're slowing down too quickly right now, you just shut off the magnetic field, and the only thing you'll see is the atmospheric braking, which would be way lower because you would be way higher up in the atmosphere, because you wouldn't need the same sort of atmospheric resistance to see the same amount of slowing down. And that would also then lead you to have lower thermal stresses on the spacecraft, which would mean you could go deeper if you wanted to and do things quicker, and you wouldn't have to spend months of time in orbit. Yeah, it's very interesting, but it hasn't actually been tried yet, and we don't have that model in the game either. Interstellar Quest actually, well no, Interstellar Extended does that, not Interstellar Quest. That was a series by another YouTuber from it's a great series. Anyways, yeah. Enough about atmospheric re-entries, magnetic or otherwise. We make it down, we bring the science, and we can do more exciting things in the future. I've been Gaspachian, thank you for watching.